We're up.
Okay.
We're up. Good.
Okay. Welcome to this meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. This meeting is a rescheduled regular board meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Our Audit, Finance, and Budget Committee met on September 23rd and recommended the full board approve the annual 2019-2020 audited financial statements as presented by Lumpston and McCormick on that date and the 2020 annual report. Our Governance Committee met earlier today and reviewed a draft conflicts of interest policy and is recommending to the full board that they approve this item. Additionally, the Governance Committee compiled a summary of the board's annual self-evaluation and approved its submission to the New York State Authority's Budget Office. This is an informational item only, and no board action is required. I'd like to bring to your attention a proposed calendar of BFSA meetings for the calendar year 2021 that has been provided as an additional document in your board book. Please review the proposed schedule and inform Jeanette of any scheduling conflicts you are aware of. My calendar is rather light, so it won't be a problem for me. A revised calendar will then be distributed by email as required. The final schedule of meetings will be brought to the full board for a vote at the December board meeting. We have two City of Buffalo items on our agenda, including an update to BFSA's analysis of the city's 2021-2024 financial plan and a report on the property tax exemptions as included in the most recent final tax assessment roll. Let's begin today's meeting. I'll ask Director Floss to take a roll call of the directors.
Thank you, Chair Olson.
Here.
Yep. Secretary Arthur is excused. Vice Chair Jerzak.
Jurisdic's present. Jeanette is present.
Director Floss is present. Ex officio Mayor Brown.
Present.
Ex officio County Executive Poloncarz.
Present.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome.
Since there is a quorum present, our first order of business is to approve the minutes from BFSA special board meeting held on July 20th, 2020, and the regular board meeting held August 3rd, 2020. Directors will find a draft of these minutes and the accompanying resolution in your board book under tab 2. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Any discussion?
Second.
Any discussion? Changes, deletions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Thank you. The next item is to affirm the recommendation by the Audit, Finance, and Budget Committee to approve both the 2020 audited financial statements and the 2020 annual report. Our audit partner, Donna Gonsder, is along with the audit partner, Sarah Dayton, discussed in detail the results of the 2020 audit and the draft financial statements at the last committee meeting. Donna is present today to answer any questions you may have related to the audit. An unmodified audit opinion or a clean audit opinion has been provided on the financial statements. The draft of the financial statements is provided to you under tab 3. Are there any questions for Donna Gonzer? Okay. In addition, the Audit, Finance, and Budget Committee reviewed the BFSA's 2020 annual report and recommended the board approve this item in substantially its final form. The draft annual report has also been provided under tab 3. Any questions on this item can now be addressed by Jeanette. Any questions?
I just wanted to thank the BFSA staff for all the hard work that they did, given the difficulties of COVID and everything changing during all of this, and to say that I really appreciate all their work.
I would certainly second that. There's been an enormous amount of work behind the scenes to try to
Jim
keep.
McGovern joining.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
And I would
I'll go back
very
to
timely
you.
because I would thank Jim. He has been an invaluable help in keeping on top of this, obviously ever-changing situation. So BFSA is required to file both these items with the New York State Comptroller's Office. Additionally, these items will be submitted to various New York State officials and local officials and will also be posted on BFSA's website. The accompanying draft resolution for approval of both these items has been provided to you under tab 3. May I please have a motion to receive, accept, and approve the independent audit and the annual report as presented in substantially their final form?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Thank you. We'll now move to approval of the conflicts of interest policy. The governance committee met earlier today and has recommended that the board approve the conflicts of interest policy as provided under tab 1. We are being asked to affirm this recommendation. A draft resolution on this matter is included under tab 3. May I please have a motion to approve the conflicts of interest policy?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, questions? Okay, a certification statement will be required to be submitted to BFSA staff from each director, proxy, and employee. I'll now have Director Floss call the vote.
Okay. Chair Olson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jerzak. You need to unmute, Jeanette.
Sorry, I was muted.
I know.
Yes.
Okay. Director Floss, yes. Mayor Brown,
Yes.
County Executive Poloncarz.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes.
Thank you, Fred. Our next agenda item is to receive the BFSA staff report on the update to the review and analysis of the City of Buffalo's 2021-2024 financial plan. A copy of this report was submitted to you under tab 4 along with an accompanying draft resolution. I believe the mayor has been unable to join us so far, so we'll just, what should we do? Should we defer discussion of this until he's present?
Maybe we could, and I'll keep trying to reach him.
No, that's good. Yeah, I mean, certainly as a courtesy, and we want to hear from him, so we can just defer a consideration of the question. Okay. Is it appropriate now to consider a resolution pertaining to the City of Buffalo's financial plan, or should we defer that as well?
Could we wait a minute?
Absolutely.
Okay. You know, I'm going to step away and I'm just going to call him one more time.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Donna. Jeanette, should we jump to the review of the updated analysis on the property tax until the mayor joins us, or until we know he's not going to?
We could definitely move to that and then go back to the financial plan.
Yeah, I think that makes probably the most sense.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will just move the agenda forward on behalf of Chair Olson to review an updated analysis performed on property tax exemptions of the city of Buffalo. The staff analysis was updated based on the results of the citywide reassessment that took effect this past July 1st, 2020. There was a report on this matter included in tab 4, which Bryce will discuss with us. Nils, did you have any comments before we move into Bryce's presentation?
No.
Okay. Bryce, if you want to proceed, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just get this to full screen mode for everyone. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to address the board and provide what has become an annual update for us. Let me jump down to the right page. So today I will be reviewing the city's update of the property tax exemptions. A bit of background, the citywide reassessment was completed in 2018 and was effective with July 1st, 2020. So this fiscal year is the first year that the reassessments took effect. With there being a 2-year lag, New York State has designated an equalization rate of 90% for Buffalo. There are currently over 47,500 parcels out of 93,720 city parcels receiving some type of exemption in the current fiscal year. The city's total assessed value is $17.1 billion, and exemptions total $6.1 billion. The exemptions represent 35.6% of total assessed value in the current fiscal year. The next slide we have here compares fiscal year 2010-11 to fiscal year 2021 by major exempt property category. So the total assessed value over the 11 years has increased by $7 billion from 10.1 to 17.1 billion, or almost 70%. Total exemptions have increased by 1.5 billion, or 32%, going from 4.6 to 6.1 billion. Over that period, back in 2010-11, exemptions made up approximately 45.7% of the assessed value, whereas it's been decreased to 35.6% in the current fiscal year. This line graph just shows the historical exemption rate or amount of parcels exempt going back to 2005-06, where it was at 47.2%. Then you'll notice in 2019-20, it was at 42.8%. And then in the current year, with the reassessment in effect, it is at 35.6%. Similar to the previous graph, what we did here is we added back in the STAR rebate that is mailed directly to homeowners in the city of Buffalo. Prior to fiscal year, or really January 2015, the STAR reimbursement would go through the municipality, but now homeowners, those that purchased homes post January 1, 2015, they will receive those checks back to them directly. So that's what this red line indicates, where we built it back in. So in 2014-15, it was at 46.9%, and subsequently it's trended down to 38.7%.
Bryce, can I
Yes.
ask a question? So it isn't that we have fewer exempt properties, it's that the base has gotten bigger, am I correct? And therefore the percentage has dropped like that, and that's what we're seeing?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's the impact of the assessment, the adjusted value and the impact.
We have had a small decrease, though, in the numbers. You know, some of the schools have been sold for housing and things like that. So not too big an impact, but some of the numbers have reduced a little bit.
Yep,
Yeah.
obviously the 1 year drop is,
Due
we
to
want to
the
make sure
revale.
everyone understands why it dropped.
Correct.
And
The increase.
obviously economic growth for the last 8 or 10 years has helped lower it. That sort of steady decline is really economic growth. And now we see the space change. So,
Yeah.
Good.
And I don't have it in front of me right now, and I apologize. The actual number of exemptions citywide has decreased. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there are about 47,500 exemptions this year. It was over 55,000 a few years ago. So exemptions themselves are trending down as well. The next slide we have here are the big four cities in upstate New York: Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, and Yonkers. What we've included here is the total assessed value for the city, equalized valuation, the amount exempt equalized, and then the percent of property that is exempt, as well as pilots, and then what the city's exemption rate is, or I'm sorry, equalization rate is. You'll see that Yonkers is the outlier there, equalization rate down to 2%. The city of Yonkers has not completed a citywide reassessment since 1954. But Rochester, who's been on a 4-year reassessment cycle, is pretty close, or Buffalo and Rochester are pretty much in the same area, where you see they're both about between 35 and 36% exempt, and then the equalization rate 90% for Buffalo, and then 89.4% for the city of Rochester. Something I've added this time around, you'll see at the bottom there the available constitutional tax levying margin by each city. You can see the city of Buffalo is at approximately $108 million, city of Rochester 16.4 million, city of Syracuse at 23.9 million, and Yonkers at 78.7 million. Moving on to the next slide, what we have here is the impact of the city tax rate on the median home value in each of those 4 cities. Once again, we included the equalization rate as part of the calculation. You can see the property tax for residents in each city, with the city of Buffalo coming in at the lowest at almost $1,050, Yonkers at the high end at over $10,000, and then Syracuse and Rochester between $2,600 and $2,300. The next slide takes first ring suburbs of the city of Buffalo for the most part, identifies the city, town tax rate as well as the school rate to get you a total tax rate. Then we use the home at fair market value of $100,000 for this analysis and apply the equalization rate. So in the local market, you'll see the city of Buffalo close to $900, high in Lackawanna of over $3,300, and other municipalities ranging from $1,800 up to $2,400. This line graph goes back, or a bar chart goes back to 2010-11 through 2020-21. Identifies exempt and non-exempt as a percentage, as well as includes the total assessed value of the city of Buffalo. So in 2010-11, total assessed value was $9.9 billion, 4.6 was exempt, and 5.3 was non-exempt. Jumping ahead to the current year, you see that amount, the exempt amount, had increased by the 1.5 billion to 6.1. Percentage-wise has decreased, but then the non-exempt portion has gone from 5.3 up to $11 billion there. Next couple slides will discuss significant changes over that 11-year period. As I mentioned before, total assessed property value in the current fiscal year is $17.1 billion, an increase of $7 billion or 69.5% from the 10.1 billion in fiscal year 2011. Total property exemptions increased by 1.5 billion over that same period. Specific categorical changes include an increase in government exemptions of 822.9 million, an increase in non-for-profit exemptions of 532.8 million, an increase in economic development exemptions of 146.2 million. There's an increase of 65 million in housing and all other exemptions, and then a decrease in residential exemptions of 95 million. Government exemptions maintains being the largest exemption category at 2.4 billion, or roughly 40% of all exemptions. The increase in government exemptions in the amount of 822.9 million can be broken out by the following larger projects or subcategories. New York State property exemptions increased by almost $349 million. 220 million of that is related to 4 properties located on the medical campus. City exemptions increased by 213.7 million. 175 million of that increase is attributed to the Bird Island wastewater treatment plant. Public authority exemptions increased by 93.4 million. Public housing exemptions increased by 52.3 million. Federal property, which excludes the public housing portion, increased by 46.4 million, with the largest contributor to that increase being the federal courthouse at Niagara Square, which increased by 49.8 million. The Buffalo City School exemptions increased by 44.6 million, even in light of several of the properties being sold off to be utilized for housing. And then all other government exemptions increased by 23.8 million. Non-for-profit exemptions totaled 1.5 billion, or 24.1% of total exemptions, and it's the second largest category we're discussing today. The increase in not-for-profit exemptions can be broken out as follows. There's a increase of 266.6 million for charitable organizations. Of that, 195 million is for the Empire State Development Corporation for the Solar City property at 1207 South Park. And then roughly 72 million are all other charitable organization exemptions. And there's over 660 properties that fell under those codes. There's an increase of 159.3 million for hospital properties, 73.5 million for Gates Vascular Institute, 67.7 million for Kaleida Health, 27 million for Catholic Health Headquarters, and then approximately 9 million net decrease in all other hospital and medical properties exemptions. There's an increase of 85.2 million in education exemption properties exemptions. 21.8 million is attributed to Canisius College. 13 million increase for DeUville College, 10.8 million associated with the Buffalo Education Opportunity Center, 10.6 million is attributed to the Buffalo Transportation Museum Pierce Arrow, and then 29 million net increase on all other educational properties. The remaining not-for-profit exemptions increased by 21.7 million. Moving on to the economic development exemptions, they total 89.82 million, or 14.8 of total exemptions in fiscal year 21. This is the increase in economic development exemptions is as follows. An increase of 383.6 million for mixed use properties. In fiscal year 2011, 5 properties qualified for this exemption, and current year, there's 102 of those properties. So there's been a significant increase in utilization. The property tax exemption is valid for the first 12 years of the project. So many of the projects that are currently receiving this exemption, those exemptions are set to expire between 2024 and 2031.
Bryce, are those mostly properties with affordable housing included?
No, not these projects.
Okay.
Not these projects. These were the ones where it was the mixed use, where if it was a commercial redesign, there had to be, if they set several apartments aside, they could qualify for the exemption. This is the, and I don't have the exemption code right in front of me, but I'll pull it in a moment. This is the one that's been a little controversial the last
Right.
few years. 485A, I want to say. I need to double check on that one.
Uh-huh.
I might be blending that with the Empire Zone one.
It's a 584B, I think, is Bryce.
B, all right, thank you.
584B.
Thank you. Sounds about right. So
This is the one where there were a number of applicants with minimal compliance, right?
that is correct.
Yeah.
And I believe the City Common Council is moving forward to suspend offering that exemption going forward in the city of Buffalo.
I see.
The IDA authorized exemptions increased by 35 million. There was an increase of 15.4 million on business investment properties. Exemptions increased by 15.3 million for Urban Development Corporation non-residential projects. And then there was a decrease of approximately 271 million for the Empire Zone property. The program that expired at June 30th, 2010. So all these projects finally rolled off, matured, and no longer receiving that exemption. And then all other exemptions, there was a net decrease of 32.3 million under the economic development heading. Moving on to housing and all other exemptions, they total 268.1 million or 4.4% of total exemptions. This one would include the low and moderate housing exemptions. Housing exemptions increased by 65 million. Low and moderate income housing exemptions increased by 114.3 million. The railroad exemptions decreased by 32.9 million. And the remaining exemptions were a net decrease of 16.4 million. Moving on to residential exemptions, they total $1 billion in fiscal year 21 and represent 16.8% of total exemptions. The decrease in residential exemptions of 95 million is really attributed to the change in the school tax relief program, the STAR program, implemented by New York State law. As I mentioned earlier, any property owners for property sales that closed on or after December 1st, 2014, they registered directly with New York State. And then the basic and enhanced STAR credits are provided directly to the qualified homeowners. And then looking at it historically, this had an impact of decreasing residential exemptions in the amount of approximately 127 million. Then all other residential exemptions increased by 31.9 million, include increases to senior citizen exemptions of 14.8, veteran exemptions of 11 million, and 1.5 million for the new long-term resident exemption. This was an exemption that was implemented last December. The board's spoken of previously. And then all other residential exemptions increased by 4.6 million. This slide is a year-to-year comparison, fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21. Year to year, you see numbers are very close to the changes that I discussed from 2011 to 2021. Total exemptions increased by 1.5 billion. Total assessed value went up by 6.4 billion. Total percent of property that was exempt was approximately 42.8% last year, and it's decreased to 35.6% this year. So as I said, total assessed value was 17.1 billion, an increase of 6.4 billion compared to the prior year amount of 10.7 billion. The increase of 1.5 billion is 32.7% year to year in property exemptions, and these changes include an increase in government exemptions leading the way again at 584.5 million. An increase in residential exemptions of $373.1 million, an increase of not-for-profit exemptions of $316.5 million, an increase in economic development exemptions of $191.8 million, and then an increase of $31.2 million in housing and all other exemptions. The specific properties I discussed on the 11-year comparison is part of the contributing factor on the year-to-year. But taking a step back, the real increase is the implementation of the reassessment. And as I noted earlier, significant change for the city of Buffalo was the Bird Island wastewater treatment plant. And that brings me to the end of the property tax exemptions. I know I went through them rather quickly, but if there's any questions at this time, I'd be happy to take them.
Bryce, this is Fred Floss. Could we go back just to look at what the percentages would have been without revals, so we can compare apples to apples? I'm not asking you to do it in your head today, but obviously that might help us over the next year or two, given all the other problems that we're probably going to be facing. It would be nice to know how much of this was reevaluation, how much of this is continuing economic growth, reducing the percentage of non-exempt properties. Thank you.
So, will do. Thank you.
I have, this is Jeanette. I have a related question to Fred's. Am I unmuted?
We can hear you, Director Jurasek.
Yeah. Now, goodness gracious, worrying about muting and unmuting, my question was, just as Fred asked about the percentage of change related to the reval, this question, which references something Donna once said, so if Solar City gets guarantees from the state in the form of inside of the Buffalo billion, and those subsidies take the form of tax abatement or tax exemption. Donna, you said that, Donna, are you there?
Yes, I am.
You told us once that if, and just using my example, Solar City, once their temporary investor tax exemption period runs out, they can reapply. So the question is, again, using my example, even if it's not the ideal example, so are we able to identify those exemptions which are part of development packages, or do they all blend together?
Bryce, you want to answer, or do you want me to?
Because the corollary to that is, again, using my example, let's say Solar City is a wild success with 5,000 employees. Would there be a sudden bump up when their exemption of revenue, tax revenue, when their exemption expires?
Well, two things on that, Director Jurasek. One, with the data that I receive, I do not see if it's related to any type of incentive, as you were using with your description or your example with Solar City. So that might be a question better fielded by Commissioner Estrick. The second part of it, the way Solar City is, or a large portion of the exemptions, they don't time out. So they keep receiving that exemption until they either sell the property or the property changes purposes.
Okay.
Now, the ones that do
Okay.
time out usually fall under the economic development one, as we just mentioned, the 485B, as well as the Empire Zone exemptions, which are now fully expired. Those are the ones that will usually be on a 10 to 12 year adjusted schedule where they eventually are paying their fair share of property taxes.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, but they could break it down by your request, the 485s, the 485As, 485Bs, pilots, and the ECIDAs, and different things, and different exemptions.
Oh, so we can disaggregate. Could disaggregate? Not in this report, but we could. We could.
And show which ones go on and which ones expire.
Well, I would also like to know, I think it would be valuable to know, yes, which ones go on, which ones expire. Exactly right. That's the key question because this is about revenue. Exactly.
Right.
And Donna notes it is a 485B, not a 584. So thanks, Donna. I had it wrong.
And I do actually receive them by that categorical level from the city. And what I was referring to that I don't see is if it's part of a incentive project program using Solar City, that one fell under a nonprofit charitable heading. So without going in specifically requesting the backup on that property, I wouldn't know what type of exemptions or other incentives may have been provided for that particular project.
Correct, but the city would have the backup for why it is continuing to be exempt, any property.
Right. And we did have a conversation about this once in which Donna pointed out, not complaining, but pointed out that the city has to provide streetlights and fresh, newly paved streets. And today we're looking at exemptions, and on whose nickel are the freshly paved streets and streetlights. But Donna, you don't have to refer to that. I'm simply respond to that. I'm simply echoing this matter of city resources and then recovering those dollars or not through exemptions or non-exemptions. But as Fred pointed out, perhaps we can build a schedule of when they expire, and yeah.
And then we also have to remember many of the economic developments bring businesses and people to the city. They come and work and they spend their money and go to entertainment. So there is a positive also in some of the economic developments that we've provided these exemptions to.
Yes, Donna, I understand, but that remains an intangible. We can't compute it. You are right, but it is not, how should I put it, accessible to us for analysis.
Right.
Although you, of course, are right. Thank you, everyone.
You need to unmute Chairman Olson.
Okay, so I think with that, on behalf of Chair Olson, I'll move it to the next agenda item. You're muted if you wanted to take it over. We still are unable to hear you, Chair Olson.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know how I got muted. Remotely, I guess. Are we ready to look at our review of an analysis of the City of Buffalo's financial plan?
We are ready for that, yes.
Okay. So our next agenda item is obviously the most important one, which is to receive the BFSA staff report on the update to the review and analysis of the City of Buffalo's 2021 through 2024 financial plan. Copy of the report was submitted to you under tab 4, along with an accompanying draft resolution. Do we have the mayor on to talk, or are we?
He will not be able to join us.
He will not. Okay, I'm sorry. Also, before we begin, Councilman Wyatt has asked to address the board. Councilman Wyatt, we appreciate your attendance, and I'll open the floor to you.
Chair Olson, I was just looking through who is attending, and I know when he contacted our office this morning, he intended to address our board, but I don't see anybody at this time from Common Council.
He was on before.
He was on before. So I think we'll just move into our presentation.
Okay. So Jeanette and Bryce will now discuss the report with us. And Bryce, I guess will you begin, please?
Right. Thank you very much. My first or second presentation today will be the review of the city's 2021-2024 financial plan. The financial plan summary is displayed on the first slide we have here. Revenues and transfers over the 4 years of the financial plan are projected to increase by 10.5 million or 2%. Expenditures are broken down at departmental costs, general charges, and interfund transfers out. Over the 4-year financial plan, expenditures are projected to increase by 4.8 million or less than 1%. The city's financial plan projects surpluses in the 3 out years that total 12.7 million. The next slide we have here, the first row includes the 2019-20 actuals unaudited, the 2021 adopted city budget, and then the third column is the 2021 budget with the elimination of uncertain revenues, and then the variance all the way to the right. So the 2019-20 actuals, including the issuance of a $25 million deficit note, totaled $483.4 million. The city's adopted budget for fiscal year 21 revenues totaled $519.6 million. And then the variance, when you eliminate the uncertain revenues of $79.8 million, the current year-end projection or what I determine their more reasonable revenue or the elimination of uncertain revenues is $439.8 million. And that's where we got to the variance of 80 million or 15.4%. Further breaking down these buckets, as I said, the uncertain revenues total 79.8 million. 72.8 million of that is in intergovernmental funds. That includes 65.1 million in federal stimulus funding. It's unknown if the legislation will be passed or what the amount would be provided to the city of Buffalo. There's 11 million included for the tribal state compact casino revenue. And these amounts are offset by an increase in the sales tax estimate of 3.25 million. Fines, uncertain fines total 4.1 million and include 2.6 million in parking fines, as well as 1 million in traffic fines. And these are really attributed to utilization, decrease in utilization, that is. Uncertain service charges total 2.9 million, decrease of on-street parking charges in the amount of 1.1 million, and then a decrease of 1.8 million for all other service charges, which is roughly 25% reduction of the other service charges. To avoid a year-end deficit, the city would have to take steps to utilize other available resources, as well as reduce current year expenditures. The city has the following resources available at this time. Assigned fund balance, which is estimated between $10 to $13 million. The Emergency Stabilization Fund, the rainy day fund, of approximately $38.5 million. And then there is an option of the city issuing a second deficit note in the amount of $25 million. If the city utilizes the rainy day fund, the city would have to replenish the reserve fund in future years. If a deficit note is issued, it would need to be repaid within 12 to 24 months. While such actions that we were just outlined would allow the city to avoid a year-end deficit, it would place extraordinary additional pressure on the out years of the 21-24 financial plan and draw down all available resources. The next slide we have here is fiscal year 21-22, so it is out year one. We included the city's 2021 adopted budget, in the amount of $519.6 million total revenues. The city's projections for out year one of revenues is $517.6 million. And then once again, we eliminated the uncertain revenues and reduced fiscal year 21-22 projection, which totals $470.9 million. That's a negative variance of $46.7 million or 9% when compared to the $517.6 million the city included in the initial financial plan. The uncertain revenues of $46.7 million can be broken down between two main categories. $45 million is in intergovernmental revenues, consisting of $35 million of tribal state compact casino revenue and $10 million in the New York State and incentive to municipalities. So the $35 million includes $24 million from outstanding balance from previous years, whereas the $10 million in the New York State AIM portion is an increase year to year between fiscal 21 and 22 that was budgeted. As was previously discussed, the New York State financial plan does not include any increases to local assistance over the out years of its financial plan. Fines, there's $1.7 million fines revenue, $1 million of it in traffic violations, and $700,000 in parking fines that is deemed uncertain at this time. In fiscal year 21-22, there are projected expenditure reductions of $31.5 million, $25.5 million principal and interest payment of the 2019-20 deficit note is to occur. To pay for this, there were departmental and general charge expenditures that were reduced between 10 to 12% in fiscal year 21-22 to address the payment of the deficit note. There's significant reductions in multiple appropriation lines, and wasn't clearly documented what would be reduced. There's also the inclusion of a $6 million freeze line. The information behind the assumptions were not provided in the 21-24 fiscal plan, and the impact on the reduction of services is unknown. Combined between the revenue and the expenditure, these budgetary items total $78.2 million or 15% of the total projected budget of $517.6 million for fiscal year 21-22. Moving on, the out years of the financial plan, years 3 and 4, fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. Uncertain revenues in the last 2 years of the financial plan total approximately $88.2 million. Uncertain and governmental revenues total $74.4 and include $52.3 million in state aim in the final 2 years of the financial plan, which is contrary to the state's financial plan, as I mentioned earlier. There's 22.1 million in tribal state compact casino revenue in the two out in years 3 and 4 as well. The timing of the receipt of the casino revenue is unknown. Uncertain miscellaneous revenue of 13.8 million as follows. The city included the sale of a city-owned parking ramp in year 3. The timing of a property sale is difficult to budget for, as we've seen in previous fiscal years. And then there's undefined expenditure reductions of 12 million over the final 2 years. That 6 million annually that I mentioned previously is included in years 2, 3, and 4 of the financial plan. So the next slide we have here adjusts the revenues by eliminating the uncertain revenues that were discussed. So total revenues range from 439.8 million up to 486.7 million. Expenditures were maintained. But over the 4 years of the financial plan, there's a 4-year deficit of $202.1 million, ranging from a high of 79.8 million in the current fiscal year 21, decreasing to 46.6 million in out year 1, and then 37.9 and 37.7 million respectively in the 2 final out years of the financial plan. What we have here is a historic snapshot of cash flow for the city of Buffalo, which is the blue line, Board of Education, which is that burnt orange color, and then on a combined basis, the gray. What we have is the cash flow going back to July 2017 through July 17 through October 20. And then the red all the way to the right are current projections going from November 20 through June 21. The city, as you'll see, will be going into a negative cash position basically between December through May, which will bring on a combined basis down in May as well. Board of Ed is in a good position in regards to cash flow management throughout the year. I'd like to note that part of the reason the attribution to the city of Buffalo increasing in June is that's where the federal stimulus and the casino revenue is currently maintained for a cash flow perspective. So if those 2 amounts are not received in June, the city would still be maintaining a negative cash flow between end of December through the end of the fiscal year. Other areas to be monitored over the 2021-2024 financial plan. Both the school zone camera and school bus camera revenue program should be closely monitored, and the financial plan should be adjusted as needed. All other revenues should be closely monitored, specifically those based on consumption. These revenues include parking meter charges, parking and traffic fine violations, and then other revenues to be monitored include service charges, license and permits, and the transfer from the parking enterprise fund. At this time, I will turn it back over to our executive.
Jeanette?
All right, I'm just sharing my screen. Bear with me for a second.
Very good.
Let's see, slideshow. There we go. Okay, so before I begin, or before I keep going, can you see the conclusion slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So in conclusion, some of these comments are repetitive, but they're the highlights from the review that Bryce just went through. The City of Buffalo's 2021 to 24 financial plan, as submitted on June 30th, 2020, is not compliant with the BFSA Act in that it, one, relies on uncertain revenues, and two, contains budget estimates that are unable to be evaluated, particularly in year 2 of the financial plan for the budget estimates. Uncertain revenues over the financial plan are estimated at $214.7 million and include federal stimulus of $65.1 million, casino revenue of $68.1 million, state aim restoration of $62.3 million, and to a smaller extent, various fines, service charges, and miscellaneous revenues. The analysis in the BFSA report that Bryce discussed focuses on years 1 and 2 of the financial plan, being the current fiscal year that we're in, and 2021 to 2022. The budget decisions made now clearly have an immediate impact as to how the city addresses the financial impact from COVID-19. Looking specifically at fiscal year 2020-21, or the current fiscal year, as Bryce mentioned, there's $79.8 million of uncertain revenue estimates, largely consisting of the federal stimulus and the casino revenue. Combined, $79.8 million represents 15.4% of the adopted budget. In the event these revenues are not recognized, we are aware that the resulting budget gap could be closed through a combination of using all remaining unrestricted fund balance, ranging between $48.5 million to $51.5 million, depending on how the final 2020 year closes, and the final numbers when those are released. The use of these resources would fully deplete unrestricted fund balance or available fund balance, and would be indicative of financial instability facing the city of Buffalo. And additionally, it would require the development of a replenishment plan within the 4-year financial plan to replenish reserves to an adequate level. As Bryce mentioned, there is also available to the city of Buffalo is the ability to issue a second deficit note. The city at this time does not have the authorization from the state to issue deficit bonds. So this second deficit note, we're estimating it at $25 million, depending on when it is issued. Regardless, it's short term, but it would have a maturity of 12 to 24 months, depending on when that note would be issued. And then there's a small minor difference that would require to be closed through the reduction of expenditures as noted on the slide. These are options available to the city, but these options would clearly have a negative impact on the city directly into the next fiscal year. In addition, just looking at the current financial plan for the next fiscal year, which is 21-22, there are uncertain revenue estimates of $46.7 million. There's $35 million of casino revenue that Bryce already mentioned. $24 million of that is past due, representing monies that should have been paid to the city over the past several years, but has not. $10 million for the current estimate for 21-22. Also includes a $10 million year-to-year increase in state aim. The non-receipt of these revenues would have a significant financial consequence on the city of Buffalo. Backing to state aim for a second, I do want to remind the directors that in the current fiscal year, the city did reduce the state aim estimate, the revenue estimate, by 20%, or $32.3 million. And over the financial plan, there's a general assumed restoration of the state aim, which is what we have classified as uncertain, as it's unclear at this time whether or not the state will be able to restore it. The state has not included any increases or any restorations over their financial plan. So in addition to the uncertain revenue, there's also unspecified budget reductions, the majority of which is related to the deficit note that was sold in June 2020, and it requires repayment in 2021-22. Um, there's a general reduction in different expenditure categories of 25.5 million, but there's no details available for us to ascertain the reasonableness of those budget reductions, and furthermore, what potential impact there could be on services to city residents. The second bucket of budget reductions is a general, referred to as like a general budget freeze account of 6 million. That's annually beginning in 21-22, 6 million annually each year, which is not inconsistent with what we've seen in budgets in the past. But this we're pointing out and emphasizing as it's in addition to all these other uncertainties or budget reductions, and it becomes more material in combination with those considerations. Again, our focus really was on 2022-23. I'm sorry, on the first 2 years, but I do have a couple comments on 2023 and 2024 for you. Again, there's a 6 million annual reduction to the general budget, of which we don't have the details on. Not that that's a particular concern, because that is, 3-4 years out, and probably would be tied into the reductions that they would have in 21-22. There is a cumulative restoration of state aid provided in the amount of 52.3 million, and casino revenue projected over these 2 years also, the cumulative amount of 22.1 million. Okay, so in addition to those items discussed today, it's further noted that any other anticipated revenue shortfalls or expenditure increases, they could occur due to COVID or to other circumstances. And in addition to the recommendations that were drafted within the draft resolution provided to you for your consideration today, we continue to recommend the city monitor financial operations and develop a revised financial plan as necessary, noting that the revised plan be developed with sufficient time to react as proactively as possible to lessen the impact on services to the extent possible. That summarizes the financial plan. And at this point, I will pause for questions.
Hi, this is Fred. Have we done an analysis of what the other big 5 cities or other cities around the country of the same size, the issues that they're having? How do we look relative to others? Now, we have the obvious casino revenue seems to be the only thing that's fundamentally different from other cities of our size. But other than that, I mean, presumably we're seeing fine revenue go down all across the country as nobody goes up. Is ours out of whack with what other cities are seeing? We obviously are going to have questions on property taxes and the property tax cap and what the estimates of revenues are on those. Have we seen anything from any of the other cities in New York to start to address that? Or are we, because we have a control board, the first ones up and trying to work on these issues that everyone else is going to have to face?
Bryce, and Bryce, you can interrupt if I say anything that needs correction. He did look into what some of the other big 4 cities are doing, specifically Syracuse, Yonkers, and Rochester. New York City is such an outlier. We didn't look at what they were doing. So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach that cities are taking. So what we have found in one city is that while the city of Buffalo budgeted for federal stimulus, and I don't believe any of the other cities did, the other cities did not budget for a decrease in state aid. So it ends up, kind of balancing from that point forward. We have found the city took a very conservative approach with their budget reductions for sales tax. And we found, at least on a cash basis through, Claire, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but through the last sales tax, almost flat to last year, a $500,000 decrease year to year, which is exceptional. That's not calendar year, that's fiscal year cash basis. We have found that there's some cities that have enacted furloughs. There's some cities that are currently negotiating with their unions to enact furloughs. I think that was more done before than it is a current thing. Bryce, is there any other major highlight that I'm missing from your analysis that you did? I realized it was probably 6 weeks ago, but.
The only other two portions I would add to is the big three were utilizing fund balance to plug the gap, as well as increasing property taxes. So if you remember back to the property tax exemption slide I did, we did include the numbers for the big four of where that constitutional cap is. And relatively speaking, the city of Buffalo is in good shape compared to the other three. Executive Director Roberti mentioned the furloughs. Some of the staffing management plans they started to put in effect back in April, realizing that they would need a few months to negotiate with unions to be ready to go once the new fiscal year rolled around. But across the board, revenues are down for the most part, except for the utilization of fund balance and increase in property taxes.
So we're seeing approximately the same percentage holes in everybody's budget. Is that fair to say?
That's probably fair to say, but what we're finding is that the other cities have addressed it differently through a combination of increased property taxes, knowing that there was a financial storm coming from the COVID, as well as the ability to rely on fund balance. Whereas the city of Buffalo relies more on a balanced budget format.
Right. And I'm glad to see that the city is trying to freeze its budget and do we have any estimate, maybe Donna knows, on retirements and as a way of reducing the size of the workforce as opposed to furloughs or layoffs or whatever we're going to say about that as we look at the out years?
At this time, we're not replacing people who have retired. I think a lot of people, the increase will start in January for people retiring. We have been keeping our seasonals working. We've used them for our cleaning and through all the buildings and all the community centers and wherever people congregate. We've been keeping them working. We did work with our crossing guards, and they are on a furlough program right now due to the schools being closed, some open, closed, so they are on a furlough currently. I think we talked, in summertime about you can't cut everything. We still have certain services we have to maintain. And I think the mayor, with his conversations with Schumer and our local delegation, that we are going to get some money out of the HEROES Act. We don't know the dollars amount. He's working with our local delegation to get approval for the deficit notes to expand the repayment as opposed to doing it in 1 year. Perhaps it'll be 5 years or 10 years. And once again, the deficit bonds, I know you had submitted something to the state on bonding monies also, if needed. Selling properties in the future, we could do that. We're not doing that at this time. We hope to hang on to our capital assets as needed. We did put, departments had put a 5% freeze on their departments. So we have approximately $10.5 million currently in a freeze account. We are going back again and looking at the departments for additional funds right now. We're working on that currently.
So is there any planning to somehow figure out a furlough if we go back to the HEROES Act and there's enhanced unemployment benefits for people where they might not be as hurt. I don't know how you would rotate that or rotate people on and off to be able to maybe mitigate the pain if we were to look at that. And I'm assuming we'd have to negotiate with our unions.
We would have to negotiate with our unions. We have looked at that. There's the work share program that we've talked to them about. So yes, we have started those discussions.
Okay, and if we talk
for January.
To the delegation about putting some kind of language that would help us then to be able to pay for those folks through an enhanced HEROES program or something like that, has that been put on the table?
That's been the conversation, along with the extension of the payback of the deficit notes, or if necessary, the deficit bonds.
Thank you.
You know, our hope is not, I mean, I know you talk about using the rainy day fund, but for me, that would be our last resort, is to use the rainy day fund. You know, we'd need the cash, kind of as Bryce identified in the graphs.
Right, that was a more a theoretical than anything we would recommend. We wouldn't recommend that either.
I mean, from the theoretical standpoint, what is our plan if we do hit a place where we no longer have cash flow, even with the school district?
I would anticipate, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Jeanette.
Okay. I would anticipate, based on comments that I've heard by the deputy controller at certain meetings, is that a revenue anticipation note would be issued. To what extent, that obviously would be calculated by the controller's office, in anticipation of either state aid or property taxes, or maybe a combination of the two.
So we're monitoring that to make sure that
Yes,
everything's going ahead of time enough to be able to do that. Okay.
You know, we have also closed some programs. I don't know if you've been reading, we closed the pools this year, the indoor pools. You know, we're not anticipating opening any outdoor pools until, you know, this whole thing goes over. Ice skating rinks, a lot of the recreation programs have been closed. The senior programs have been closed. They've gone all virtual. So there has been cuts in some services, and they've been delivered in different ways.
Are we saving money by going virtual? Do we know? I mean, obviously, some things we might save money from, but we still need people to deliver the services virtually, you know, or in person, or?
We save money on the buildings, the community actual centers, where we're not heating or electric, or we're not having to clean every single day. On the people, our unions have been terrific about, perhaps I don't have enough to do with my senior program, so can I come and help here? And they've been helping with the youth programs. We had a senior van driver who came over and is now helping in parking, doing some of the cleaning and at the impound. So people have been working that way to help us, the different union members.
And that's great to hear. I mean, I think maybe we don't get enough of how people are working together to try to save money and try to fulfill work obligations and things. We only hear the bad things. And I think maybe we need to put out something on that to say, look at, you know, how hard a lot of these folks are working in these really difficult times, you know, particularly with workers who have children and everything else that we've all heard on television. Very rarely do we hear about the public sector workers who are doing the same things, you know, including the folks on the BFSA staff here too. So I will just say that I think that that's something that has to come out, not just the negative news that we're hearing.
Okay, well, I would add a gloomier assessment, I guess. The problem here is fairly clear. It's understandable that the city is relying on appropriate increases in federal assistance, increases in state assistance, compliance with the arbitrator's order with respect to the Seneca gambling. The problem is obviously that this is an ongoing guess as to what's going to happen. As I look at the tea leaves, it seems that a significant federal infusion of dollars seems problematic unless there is a change in control of the Senate. Current discussions in the Senate, at least, about COVID-related aid, either admit completely aid to municipalities or it's scaled down significantly. So I understand it. The House has also dropped their, in an effort to negotiate, has dropped the amount considerably. The city has limited but significant options. We've talked about the remarkable increase in constitutional tax limit that this administration has been able to achieve, as opposed to the way it was when the BFSA was created, where they were right at the level. There are problems, obviously, in raising taxes too much during a time of a significant economic downturn, particularly for low-income residents of the city. There's a rainy day fund, and there are cuts to services. The problems, obviously, with cuts in services is the city needs to maintain essential services, police, fire, streets. That's where most of the money is in terms of services. So I think recognizing and hoping that the city is correct and understanding why the budget is this way, I think it's reasonable for the BFSA under the terms of our act to try to get a handle on perhaps a less optimistic vision and plan for what would be done, and one that contains more specificity. We've tried to, in our proposed resolution, we've tried to time this in a way that gives the city the utmost flexibility and also time to see what occurs in all of these various settings. I must have been pessimistic about the Seneca income as well, just given the history of this and the fact that the agreement may be renegotiated at some point. So I guess that I would concur with Jeanette's conclusions that the current plan fails to meet our requirements, and we need to request a modified plan that would reflect revenues that are reasonably available as of that date, hoping that something can be done to get appropriate federal assistance to municipalities in the state. The obvious other problems relate to the state's budget and what it's going to do in the out years with respect to this, the uncertainty about deficit bonds and whether or not that will be granted. So that I really sympathize with the mayor and Donna, and that this is all extremely uncertain. The only thing that's certain is that there's going to be serious problems if these things don't occur. And finally, obviously, the other problem that we haven't addressed here, but which we're going to need to look at, is the Buffalo School District with respect to out years in the event that aid to education is significantly reduced in any manner, in that they have such an extreme reliance on state aid in terms of providing services. The problem with the schools is enhanced by the fact that they have not been able to do any meaningful on-site instruction, which is particularly difficult for students with special needs and low-income students. So that when this thing begins to shake out and public education is resumed in a more traditional fashion, they're going to have to catch up somehow. It's been close to a year now. where I suspect serious educational deficits have occurred among certain children. That requires more money, not less. So I guess those are my underlying concerns as I look at this, with a complete understanding and sympathy with the attempt to maintain essential services and employment through these revenues. But because they're uncertain, I think it's important to have an alternative, detailed financial plan that we can consider. Any other comments, questions? Donna?
No, I know the mayor is not comfortable voting for this, that he
I
feels
understand.
he would
I
like
understand
to.
completely.
Pardon me? Okay.
I understand completely. You're in a terribly difficult position. It's important to maintain public optimism with respect to services. It's important to maintain optimism with respect to layoffs, also with respect to tax increases, so that we all agree with the mayor that this would be an ideal situation, and we certainly hope that it occurs. And I can understand why he would not be comfortable voting against his, voting to find his proposed plans to be non-compliant.
But I would like to also state that we are working on other plans.
Yeah, I'm sure you are right.
It's not comfortable voting on this right now today.
Yeah. And what we've tried to do is to time this in a way that it doesn't press you into any premature announcements of alternative plans that might cause concern among employees and residents. So we're trying to give you a long enough time frame to see how this all shakes out, because obviously what you are confronted with now is an enormous amount of uncertainty.
Correct.
Political, economic, the level of uncertainty is remarkable. And to expect you to be able to somehow get on top of it and have an accurate picture is, I think, somewhat unrealistic. So we're trying to make this as give you enough time to make it possible to do this in an appropriately measured manner. Particularly the specificity with respect to dealing with cuts in the event that some of these revenues don't occur. Okay, anything else?
Yes, I have one mechanical question to Donna. Donna, would you just quickly describe one more time that lifeline? Because it appears we are going to go cash negative. How does that lifeline work again? Is it state money?
If we do a revenue note, you mean?
No. If we have a cash flow crisis, and we saw Bryce's model of it, and you said in that case there is and you described a recourse. What would you describe that lifeline again? If cash dips negative?
Well, the comptroller's office would make the decision whether to do a revenue anticipation note, which would then come through for the taxes and state aid that would be at that time of year. Or we would do another deficit note at that time.
So a revenue anticipation note is the same thing as a deficit note?
It is not. It's payable in a shorter payment time, and that's when your revenues come in. So it would be coming in July.
Okay, all right.
When you receive property taxes.
All right. And do we do that in the private sector or with the state of New York or with the state comptroller?
That would be through the city comptroller.
Oh, okay, but I mean, we don't do it in the private sector.
I'm not. We would go out like we would our
the bonds
regular bonding.
Oh,
It's in
okay.
the
All right.
private.
Okay. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Donna or Jeanette? Okay, then we will now consider a resolution pertaining to the City of Buffalo's financial plan. An updated copy of the resolution was emailed to you. For the reasons that we have discussed in the report and in the resolution, the BFSA would require a modified financial plan be submitted by December 1st. The modified plan is to reflect only those revenues that are reasonably certain as of that date. It also shall provide details for department and other expense reductions to permit evaluation of the reasonableness of such expense reductions and to understand and evaluate the impact on essential city services. We are requiring a 2-year monthly cash flow projection be provided through June 30th, 2021, based on the revised revenue and expenditure estimates. Furthermore, we are recommending the mayor and common council, in consultation with the city controller and BFSA, carefully evaluate tax increases against possible impairment of essential services. We furthermore recommend the city request the state legislature to enact legislation enabling the city to enact a local law providing for a tax freeze for city residents who meet certain criteria to ensure that such residents are not unduly harmed by such increases. May I have a motion to approve the resolution requiring a modified City of Buffalo's 2021 budget and 21-24 4-year financial plan be submitted to BFSA by December 1st?
So moved.
Is there a second?
December 31st, correct?
First.
It is December 31st.
31st.
I was going to make an amendment.
Out this morning.
That's right. This was a
changed,
change we made, obviously, for
Going to
the reason
make an amendment
to avoid the Bethlehem Steel problem of getting bad news over the holidays. This also obviously provides more time to let things shake out. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll now ask Director Floss to take a roll of the vote.
Chair Olson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jerzak. You're muted, Jeanette.
Approved, aye.
Director Floss, aye. Mayor Brown?
Mayor Brown will abstain. I will be willing and happy to work with our executive director and provide information to her, but there's not public information right now. So
Correct.
we'd like to provide.
County Executive polling cars?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the ayes have it and the resolution is adopted. And
We're one vote short though, right?
1, 2, 3, yeah, well, yeah, we have 4
Right.
of the 5.
So we're in the position we were in before. I will comment that there is a slight glimmer of hope on the horizon, and that the state controller has apparently nominated a replacement member, which is pending at the current time, but it's only pending, unfortunately. Given this situation, I will now call for an ad hoc committee of only those directors voting on this action pursuant to our amended bylaws, as we did previously.
Okay. So Chair Olson?
Yes, and what we're doing is we're requesting the ad hoc committee to recommend approval of this resolution at our next board meeting.
Right.
And I'll vote yes.
Okay. Vice Chair Jerzak?
Jerzak votes for yes for the ad hoc committee.
Director Floss votes yes. Mayor Brown?
I didn't vote. Am I eligible to vote on it?
No.
Okay. Well, she did vote as an abstention. It's still a vote, but we won't get into
Right, but it's an ad hoc of
Yes.
yes votes.
Okay. And County Executive polling cars.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, you have the motion passed.
Thank you. And this will just be carried over to our next meeting. I'd like to thank Donna and the mayor for their significant collaboration and assistance that have been provided the executive director and our staff in this period of enormous uncertainty. And certainly wish them well in this process. Is there any new business? Okay, hearing none, this concludes the meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?